What's up, fellow connoisseurs of fiction? It's me, Full0Grace, and today I'm going to be summarizing the book Artemis Fowl. Before we get into the actual book, let's start off with a quick summary of the characters. Of course, we must begin with the namesake of this whole series, Artemis Fowl II, the young criminal mastermind. The 12-year-old Irish boy is described as having icy blue eyes and being as white as a vampire from years of being indoors in front of the computer. Next on the list, we have Master Fowl's bodyguard since birth, Butler. The Russian-Japanese man is a heavily trained 6-foot mountain of muscle with dark blue eyes. Butler's main priority is the safety of his charge, Artemis, and his baby sister Juliet. The aforementioned Juliet Butler is a gorgeous blonde who has been trained by her brother in martial arts but lacks discipline. She is currently working for the Fowls as a maid. The last human we need to acknowledge is Angeline Fowl, Artemis's mother. Unfortunately, we don't see much of her since the woman hasn't left her room for almost a year due to nervous tension over the loss of her husband several years ago. When we first see her, it becomes quite clear that she barely has a grip on reality, if at all. Before we proceed, I feel I should explain some things. There are a couple different species of fairy: elf, dwarf, centaur, goblin, just to name a few. Almost all fairies are about 3 feet tall. Then there is the fairy's ability to use magic. First, there is shielding, the ability to vibrate so fast that you become nearly invisible. The mesmer is second. This ability is used to make others bend to your will. It requires direct eye contact. The third is the ability of healing. This requires skin-on-skin contact. Last but certainly not least is the gift of tongues. Basically, it's the ability to speak any language, human, fairy, or even animal. There are a few more magic rules, but we'll get to those later. The elf, Captain Holly Short, is described as having nut brown skin, short auburn hair, hazel eyes, and pointed ears. She's a flyboy and the very first female leprechaun officer. And no, not leprechaun. Leprechaun is an elite branch of the lower elements police. Since she's the very first female officer ever to be recruited, she's under extreme pressure since all her actions are under the microscope. Then there is Holly's commanding officer, Captain Julius Root, also an elf. The commander can almost always be found with a lit fungus cigar. He has a quick temper and he busts Holly's chops, but that's only to make sure that she does her best. He's always looking out for his officers. The centaur Foley is the tech whiz of the LEP. This inventor is one of the few beings out there that can compete with Artemis's big brain. Unfortunately, the guy is extremely paranoid and insists on wearing a tinfoil hat over his head at all times. Foley also has the habit of intentionally poking his superior's buttons, specifically Commander Root. The only reason he gets away with it is because they can't afford to fire him. Next, we have the kleptomaniac dwarf Mulch Diggums, a career thief who has intentionally given up his ability to use magic. Mulch also likes to push Commander Root's buttons, even more than Foley. He also will eat anything. Mulch has tombstone teeth as well as a beard and head of living hair. Okay, dwarves are going to need a bit more explanation than the others. They have the ability to tunnel through the ground, and when I say tunnel, I don't mean like dig. More like an underground torpedo. I'd rather not get into that much detail on the subject. Just know they can unhinge their jaw and then, well, dirt comes in one end and comes out the other. All fairies are underground creatures that prefer to come above ground only at night. But for dwarves, it's even more important. They are extremely light sensitive. They will only go up topside if they are completely covered and have a lot of sunscreen on. Dwarves have even more unique qualities, but we really don't have time to get into that in this video. Last and certainly least, Lieutenant Brian Cudgeon. He will not hesitate to walk over anyone in his way as he tries to reach the top. With that taken care of, let's get on to the actual book. In the prologue, we see this story as a filed report on the actions of the young criminal mastermind, put together from first-hand interviews of the victims. We start off with Artemis Fowl and his bodyguard looking for one of the fair folk, and an informant claims he knows of one. He guides them to an old woman who Artemis tries to talk to, but she refuses. Wine first, then talk. As Artemis hands a bottle of whiskey to the woman, he glimpses her green hand. Artemis gets down to business. What I want from you is your book. Of course she claims she has no book, but Artemis makes it quite clear that he knows exactly what she is. Realizing she can't hide, she threatens him with magic, but he waves her threats aside. He then proceeds to give her an offer. 30 minutes with her book, and not only will he restore her magic, but he will also counter the holy water he tricked her into drinking, which will kill her. From her filthy robes, the fairy pulls a golden book, which Butler begins to photograph. Once completed, Artemis follows through on his promise. Now let's take a moment to cover some family history. Basically, the Fowls have been on the wrong side of the law for generations. It wasn't until Artemis Fowl I, our dear main character's father, decided to invest in doing business in Russia that things took a turn. The Russian mafia took Senior's actions as a threat, so they launched a missile at the Fowl Star. Artemis Senior was on board. Artemis vows to restore the family's fortune. Upon arriving home, Artemis decides it would be a good idea to check in on his mother. When he enters her dark room, Artemis is relieved that she at least recognizes him, but she begins to whisper about things in her room, how she can hear them at night and how they crawl into her ear. All he can do is blink back tears as his mother starts to hear the voices again, and she dives under the covers. Desperate for distraction, Artemis dives into trying to decipher the fairy book. After working on it all night, he has the first page deciphered. The Book of the People, being instructions to our magic and life rules. Carry me always, carry me well. I am thy teacher of herb and spell. I am thy link to power arcane. Forget me, and thy magic shall wane. 10 times 10 commandments there be. They will answer every mystery. Cures, curses, alchemy. Thy secrets shall be thine through me. But fairy, remember this above all. I am not for those in mud that crawl. And forever doomed shall be the one who betrays my secrets one by one. He's cracked the fairy language, Gnomish. Once the book has been translated, Artemis begins to plan on how he can get the fairy gold. Now we turn our attentions down to near the Earth's core, where we find Holly Short lying in her bed, silently fuming about Commander Root. Begrudgingly, Holly rolls out of bed to get ready for work. As Short walks into the LEP lobby, she notices a certain dwarf is picking every pocket he can get his hands on, including the officer he's handcuffed to. Holly makes a beeline for her cubicle, but Root's angry voice blasts from his office. With a sigh, Short enters the room. Root is singling her out again, and he even says the reason he is because she's a girl. But before she can lose it, he explains. But not for the reasons you think. You are the first girl in recon. Ever. You are a test case, a beacon. There are a million fairies out there watching your every move. There are a lot of hopes riding on you. But there's also a lot of prejudice against you. The future of law enforcement is in your hands, and at the moment, I'd say it's a little heavy. He explains she must be the best, but ever since the Hamburg debacle, Holly asks for a second chance. Before Root can respond, the commander is notified of a rogue troll loose on the surface. Root decides this is the perfect second chance for Holly, but there's a problem. The commander asks her point blank if she's running hot on a full tank of magic, and she lies. It's been 4 years since she's completed the ritual. Foley fills Holly in on the situation while he equips her with the Locator, a voice-activated camera, and a Neutrino 2000. Once Holly arrives on the surface, she's off. As Holly gets inside of the town, she activates her shield, vanishing from sight. The troll is pounding on the town's outer wall. Holly informs control of the situation, and is told that route and retrieval's ETA is 5 minutes. That's too long. Holly wants to go in and help, but she can't unless she is given an invitation. From the town comes a child's cry for help. Technically an invitation. After a rather complicated encounter involving a table, petrol, candles, and bright lights, the poor beast has had too much, and passes out. Holly then uses a bit of fairy tech to knock out all the humans. As Holly expected, Root is furious, and demands that she explain herself. Before she can finish, it is revealed that Holly is out of magic. The commander is even more furious, and instructs Holly not to return underground until she's completed the ritual. Through the book, Artemis learns of the ritual. From the earth thy power flows, given through courtesy, so thanks are owed. Pluck thou the magic seed, where full moon, ancient oak, and twisted river meet, and plant it far from where it was found, so return your gift into the ground. So all they had to do was find a location that matched that description and stake it out. Holly looks for a magic hotspot. She lands, removes her helmet, and pauses a moment to admire the view before leaning over to find a seed. Butler and Artemis have been pulling stakeouts for 4 months, when a figure appears by the tree, too small to be an adult, but the wrong proportions for a child. Butler takes aim with his rifle, But at the exact moment he fires, the figure crouches. Holly realizes she's under fire and draws her weapon as she rolls out of the way. A mountain of a mudman manages to grab her neutrino. Holly turns at the sound of a smaller human. "Stay back, human. You don't know what you're dealing with." The mudboy isn't phased. Holly tries to use mesmer, but the humans are wearing mirrored glasses, preventing eye-to-eye contact. When Rue returns to the LAP, he learns they've lost contact with Captain Short. They go over the camera feed of the whole abduction. Once they realize just how bad things are, Root makes his way to the surface to follow Holly's beacon. Holly wakes to find herself in a concrete cell with a young woman wearing mirrored glasses. The mud maid introduces herself, and after several attempts to trick Juliet into taking off her glasses, she tells Holly that they know that while a fairy is in a human dwelling, they must do what the human wants. Root tracks Holly's locator beacon to a ship. While below deck, a tiny speaker informs Root that if he's trying to find his missing officer, he's come to the wrong place. Root finds Holly's locator next to a bomb counting down. "Fly, little fairy, and tell your friends Artemis Fowl II says hello." "Darvit!" growls Root. There's no point translating this word, as it would be censored. The commander barely makes it off the ship before everything explodes. Holly sits on her bed, digging an acorn out of her boot. Now she just needs to plant it to get her magic back. But how? Artemis pays Holly a visit and reveals that he knows too much about the fairies. Artemis tells Holly they used a truth serum on her for over 60 hours. She's devastated. Even if she does manage to get out of here, she'd be banished for revealing the secrets. Guild stabs at Artemis and wonders just how far he'll go for the scold. Foley has the whole Fowl family backstory after hacking into Interpol. They realize where Holly is and hope they can sort this all out before daybreak. Sunshine dilutes their magic, and besides, they only have one day according to the book. Once the time is up, the humans win. Lieutenant Cudgeon, Retrieval Squad's leader, is ticking Root off by recommending they just write off Captain Short as a lost cause and biobomb the building. Meanwhile, the Retrieval Squad is moving across the Fowl's lawn, led by Captain Trouble Kelp. They have a rather painful run-in with Butler, who knocks them all out, except Corporal Grub Kelp. Butler tells Grub that they want a negotiator. Holly begins to slam her metal bed frame into the floor, much to Juliet's annoyance. Foley sets up a time stop around Fowl Manor and preps Root for going in as a negotiator. Foley gives him a dark gun disguised as a finger and also an iris cam, which is basically a camera contact lens. Not long into the negotiation discussion, the commander quickly realizes he didn't have the bargaining chips he thought he did. Artemis makes his demand of 1 ton of 24-karat gold. Root is then dumbfounded, but Artemis insists that he can escape the time field, which is totally impossible. As Root leaves, Artemis makes a rather important statement. "But remember this, none of your race has permission to enter while I'm alive." Root storms out of the building. He needs to make a call. Not long after, Mulch is on the surface. Diggums can enter the building without permission because he's given up his magic. After equipping Mulch with an iris cam, the thief tunnels in through the wine cellar. Mulch sneaks through the manor while Foley loops all the cameras. After Artemis discovers and fixes the loop, he finds things aren't going as he planned. Mulch has stumbled upon a hidden safe, which he cracks to find a copy of the book. Holly has finally broken through to the ground underneath. She plants the seed and gets her magic back. Juliet goes to check in on the prisoner, but ends up being mesmered into letting Holly out of her cell. As Mulch is leaving, he bumps into Holly. He shows her his find, and she is thrilled to find out she hasn't betrayed the people. Mulch offers to help her get out, but she's been instructed by her host not to leave the manor. Instead, she goes in search of Fowl. As Mulch is tunneling underground, he fakes his own death to avoid prison. Root and Foley can't believe that Mulch is dead, but before they can investigate, they realize something. If Artemis dies, they can enter the building. Cudgeon thinks he has the perfect solution. His brilliant plan is to release the troll they just captured into the building. Holly finds Artemis in the security room along with her tech. She re-equips herself, punches Artemis, sees the troll coming through the security feed, as well as Butler carrying his still mesmered sister right into the line of fire. While she may not want to stay, she doesn't want them to die. Butler finds himself face to face with the troll, and in an attempt to save his sister, is mortally wounded. Holly flies onto the scene and once again battles the troll. She too doesn't fare that well. Before healing herself, she helps Butler. The bodyguard goes full medieval on the troll with armor and mace. Butler spares the troll, but only because Holly begs him to. Cudgeon's plan has failed, and when he goes a bit too far, Root accidentally darts him with a fake finger. Root sends in the gold, but only because they plan to send in the biobomb right after Holly leaves. Artemis sends Holly back with half of the gold as payment for a certain wish. After the biobomb is activated, Holly leads Root and the rest of Retrieval through the Fowl Manor, but the others can't make it past the threshold. That means that Artemis is still alive. Artemiss Fowl II has won the battle and gets to keep the gold. If you want to know how Artemis managed to escape the time stop, or what Artemis's wish was, then I highly recommend you go read the book. In fact, go ahead and read the whole series written by Ian Colfer. Before I go, I need to add a quick note. Be aware this has to do with the Artemis Fowl movie, so you've been warned. In the actual book, there's a picture. This shows a bit of the book in the fairy language, Gnomish. So why have they changed this picture to have the movie version of the writing instead? This shouldn't be in the books. And when I borrowed the audiobook so I could listen to the story while I worked, look what I found. This kind of stuff just hurts my inner nerd. Anyway, I'm Full0Grace, and I'll see you next time.